This video is for people who are right now going through a spiritual awakening and wondering why their entire life is coming apart at the seams. Oftentimes, a spiritual awakening will begin initially in a good way, where you feel maybe for the first time ever the connection with the divine, connection with the source of all creation. It's not some idea or imaginative thing. It's a sensation in your body. And you feel oftentimes elated and just connected to everything. But then what usually happens after a short while is that pink cloud dissipates and you find yourself back in your old ego structure, back in your ordinary life. And that wouldn't even be so bad if that ordinary life didn't start to fall apart. And I'm talking everything, all important areas of your life, your key relationships maybe, your living situation, your house, your home, your career, your health sometimes, and lastly, your identity, the sense of safety in your identity, all will simultaneously just start to fall apart. And it's very chaotic and exhausting for obvious reasons in terms of dealing with these big changes happening in your life, seemingly out of your control. But what can really be difficult is when you don't even have your former identity to grasp onto. And you can go from having this high peak spiritual experience into feeling lower than ever before, lost and confused and also exhausted. And if that's you, this video is going to help you, because it's something that, as someone who has worked with people for the last 7 years who are going through a spiritual awakening, I've seen people go through this and I see where they end up. I've seen what works for people to help them move out of this transition. I've seen the different things people can do to get the most out of it, even though it might seem like there's nothing good that will come of it. That's actually not true at all. There are many, many huge blessings that come from this. It's part of the transformation. It's part of an upgrade, believe it or not, that you're going through. And this video is I'm gonna do my best to share from my own experience and also my experience working with clients what will really help you through it and help you, most importantly, get the most out of it. So first off, I'll just say, based upon my own experience as a coach working with people, is that this happens differently for everybody. Certain things, I would say, are necessary for the individual to efficiently shake them to the core so that they can go through this sort of metamorphosis of themselves, of their consciousness. And for some people, it's very obvious on the outside world. You know, they lose their job or they're kicked out of their apartment, big things like that. And for some people, it's not like that. For some people, maybe it's leaving a toxic relationship that you've been stuck in for a long time and you finally had enough. And just the fear and the vulnerability is enough, even though you're safe in some other house by yourself or something, financially secure. So just so you know, if you're watching this and haven't gone through this yet, don't think I'm telling you your life is going to get really bad or really sucky or really precarious because you're going through a spiritual awakening. It's different for everybody. And it's also something I found that many people go through more than one time. I've gone through it several times. And what I'm going to do now is share a little bit about what it was like when I went through it. And in doing so, it's going to help you understand, it's my intention anyway, to understand what's going on with you, what to do about it, and where it's leading, okay? So what comes to mind for me as I'm discussing this is the time I was in the hospital. I was okay. I just had a new baby. And I was sitting there on this uncomfortable couch reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, kind of a fitting book for the time. And I was holding my infant son, Sebastian. And I have a picture of it actually. And I'm sitting there reading this book. And at that point in my life, everything was up in the air. I had just closed down my personal training business, which seemed like it was a big leap for me because I was a personal trainer most of my life. And it was all I knew mostly. And it was part of my identity. I felt this calling to just close it down. I knew something else was coming for me. So I closed it down. And during that time, one of the things that was supporting me was this credit card that my wife and I had that my wife's father would pay. He was a very, very wealthy man, and we had this credit card to pay a lot of our bills with and buy groceries with and stuff like that. And he was paying it for the longest time, and all of a sudden, right after I closed down my gym, he just stopped paying it and was basically like, you guys got to fend for yourselves now. So all of a sudden, like, no money was coming in. I had just had a newborn son, third child, by the way. So I had a lot of responsibilities. I needed to earn a living. And during that time also, I felt this strong calling to start making YouTube videos and to move out to California. And I wondered, how is any of this going to happen? I felt like my life was just falling apart. And by that time, I had no real friends. I luckily have my beautiful wife, Patty, who gets me. But most of the guys and people I would chill with and hang out with over the years, they kind of dropped off, and it just they fell away. And I had no real friends. I felt very alone. I felt very lost. And also, I was going through a lot of unexpected, like, healing. Like, spiritual healing was taking place during that time too. And so not only was my life situation just completely a mess, all kind of abruptly, one thing after the other, it felt like. But I was having these like deep pockets, I would say deep pockets of unconscious energy bubbling up to the surface. And I didn't even understand it at the time. I can only now look back and see it was like an ancestral healing, past life healing, these big, powerful pockets of fear and grief and sorrow. All of a sudden, they're like taking over my psyche, basically. And just everything combined, I couldn't help but think, this was a curse, this spiritual awakening. There was a time when I felt connected. I felt my own divinity more than ever before, and I knew there's more to reality, and I knew life is magical and all this good stuff. But I found myself years later where those positive vibrations were non-existent, and all I had was this life that was falling apart at the seams. I was falling apart at the seams. My identity was crumbling before my eyes. I had big responsibilities, a family to feed, and it was nuts. It was nuts. And on any given day, depending on how you found me, I would oscillate between just spiraling in misery and depression and despair and fear and panic to, okay, I got this. I know this is all happening for a reason. I know this is part of an upgrade. I knew that this was some type of divinely orchestrated mess that was going to teach me something, help me grow something within myself, and lead me to my dreams coming true. I knew it. And when I was in that frequency of faith, I was able to kind of guide myself somewhat effectively forward, whether it was to clean up the mess in my life, which there was a lot of them, or to take action and steps to sort of build up this new life. But then it wouldn't take much to like basically knock me off my square, and I would be, like sometimes just lying on the floor, looking up at the ceiling saying, why is this happening to me? And then I'd pick myself up and I'd get back into it. So if any of this sounds familiar in your own way, what seemed, I can now look back and see kind of what happened to me. And it reminds me of this thing I watched from this Bashar. I don't know if you know Bashar. He's a channeler. And at one point years ago, he was talking about December 21st, 2012, and this sort of window of transformation that we're supposedly still in. And he said, around this time, you're all going to be shaken to your core. I was like, Jesus, Bashar, shaken to our core? Yes. No. And he went on to explain why. He said, you need to be shaken up to kind of become dislodged from this hardwired, limited way of thinking and perceiving life. The lives that fall apart usually are a product of actions taken upon mostly our own conditioning, the false beliefs of who we thought we were. And a spiritual awakening starts to put you in connection with who you actually are. Or maybe at one point it was part of who you are. But regardless, you change on the inside very quickly and quickly outgrow these former circumstances. And there comes a time where you need to kind of recreate your reality in a sense to reflect who you've become. And shaken to the core. It's like shaken loose of what is not you so that you can manifest, if you will, or build what is you. But the experience of being shaken is so terrifying. It's so unsettling because there's nothing to grasp onto. And I think that's the point. You know, sometimes when big changes happen, you can kind of like lean on a little peg of safety, whether it's an idea or some prospect for the future or a family member. Usually when people get shaken in this way and their lives start falling apart in this way, there's nothing. There's nothing. It reminds me of like being in a flotation tank. Have you done that before? It's a sensory deprivation tank. It's basically a pod of water about 10 inches deep, filled with Epsom salts, like thousands of pounds of salt. So you float there like more than you would in the ocean. You just float there like a bobber in this little pod that is light-proof, soundproof, and the water is heated to your exact body temperature. So it does feel as if you are literally floating through space. And usually what the mind will do initially, because it's not used to being so free of sensory input, the mind will try to grasp onto something. So your mind can be very racy because it's like there's nothing. You're boundless basically. And it's a little bit scary and kind of chaotic. Not that scary, but it's a little bit that kind of happens. Your brain is trying to like adjust to this vastness. But eventually what happens is your brain will calm down. Your thoughts will slow. And there is something to grasp onto for safety, but it's nothing external. Not light, not sound, not physical touch, nothing. It's like your spiritual, your primordial essence suddenly becomes more where you can sense it. And you start to sink into that more and more and more, your essence. And it's quiet. And it's still, it's full of peace, full of joy, full of love, empowered, aligned, infinite. And there's this part of you that emerges, or maybe there's a part of you that you suddenly realize is there, but you were previously so distracted with the old stories, the old karmic cycles, you were in the old identity, the old thought patterns. It can take some shaking sometimes to free us of all that. And it sucks. It's scary. It's like an ego death. But the result is you becoming more aware of who you actually are. And that's what happened. That's what happened to me. As all these things were happening, it became more clear to me that everything that was falling apart, I didn't actually want in my life anyway. I preferred something very alternative to what I was clinging to. The gym, the depending on my father-in-law for money, the house I lived in. I didn't want any of it. I didn't believe I could do anything differently though. I thought that's all I could do. And shaking me to my core and basically having all my boats burned and nowhere else to go, I had no choice but to look inward. And I was able to find out what I really did want, which for me, I wanted to live in a different state. I wanted to move to California. I wanted to be like an online coach. I wanted to be a YouTuber as well. I wanted to share my ideas online. I wanted financial freedom. I wanted to not really have a job. I wanted to be able to spend time with my kids when I wanted to during the afternoons, take them to school, pick them up from school, things like that. I wanted also a sense of purpose. I wanted to know I'm making a difference in the world. I wanted to know that I was expressing myself in an authentic way that was benefiting humanity in some way. I wanted all these things. And when I had nothing to grasp to, I got this clarity, and then I started going in that direction. from the rubble of my life, these like seeds were sprouting up within myself and they come in the form of like ideas. You just start to get good ideas that resonate, that light you up. And I slowly started to I dealt with what I had to deal with and slowly started inching my way towards my future, which came pretty quickly actually. And then I found myself living almost an expanded version of all the things I just said. Living in California, I found a sense of purpose. My YouTube channel blew up more than I could have ever even imagined. I started making more money than I did before. Didn't have to rely on father-in-law anymore. I was able to make my own way, and that felt good. I felt really proud of that. And my life completely transformed on the outside, but mainly on the inside. I now knew what it meant to have faith, to live a life of faith, to follow my intuition. These are just words to most people. I was in a situation where I had to actually do that, where there was no other option. I had nothing tangible to lean on. I had the only thing that was still kind of there is my intuition. And by lack of options, I followed it, just hoping it worked. And it did work. It worked in a better way. And I found I can now navigate my life from this source of inner guidance that has always been there. And only when I was shaken enough and forced to do it, did I do it and see this is a better way of building up my life, of steering the ship in my own journey of life. So a lot of people will reach out to me and they're going through this and they say, Vic, what do I do? And then they'll share with me their situation and their circumstance. And a lot of times I find myself with this strong sense that, number one, I'm not concerned. I see this sort of metamorphosis that they're going through. I know where it's leading, and I know they're going to be very happy once they get there. I also know that any words of confirmation I'm going to share, they already know. Such as, this is all happening for a reason. This breakdown is like one side of the guitar pick, coin, and the other side is what you really want out of life. The other side is discovering who you really are at the core, discovering your real power, your real potential, experiencing deeper levels of divine connection and synchronicity, tapping into greater abilities to manifest and create awesome things in your life, a deeper sense of purpose. All of that is connected to this first stage that kind of has to happen for reasons I discussed. And it's going to be fine. Also, you're always going to know what to do. You're always going to know what to do when you need to do it. I know you don't have a map, but you have your intuition, and it always tells you what to do when the time comes. And I know if I say all that, it's going to be nothing new, nothing they have not already been telling themselves. Also, I also understand it's not my place to chime in. I don't want to interfere. If I was to tell you how to deal with your life puzzles, then you would miss the opportunity to realize your own power. All of this you also know. So normally in my videos, I like to give you little bursts of hope and it's going to be okay, things like that. But in this case, I just wanted to discuss it and share my own experience with this so that you can be reminded that you already know all this stuff anyways. You already have the faith. And now it's time to walk that path in a deeper way. And that you shall. So with that said, thank you for watching, my friend. I wish you well on your path, even though you don't need it. And I'll be in touch. All right, peace.